So this is the new Forerunner 970, and Garmin made some pretty big upgrades with this watch, and with what they've added, the 970 is kind of like a baby Fenix at this point. It's a full-featured multi-sport watch just like the Fenix 8. It also has offline topo maps and navigation. There's tons of health features, including the same heart rate sensor with ECG. There's tons of training feedback, and then now it also comes with a sapphire lens, a speaker and microphone, as well as a flashlight, just like the Fenix 8. So then what's different? Well, there's some key differences why you may want one of these over the other, and I think what makes it even more interesting is that at the time of this filming, there's some pretty good deals going on with the Fenix 8, where I think it's around like $200 off or so, which brings the price pretty close between these two. So you may be trying to decide on if the 970 suits your needs better or if the Fenix 8 is worth that extra bit of money. And that's really what this video is all about. All right, so first up when it comes to price. So the Forerunner 970 runs $750, and then the Fenix 8 usually runs anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200, but recent sales have it around like $200 off or so, depending on the model. So as little as $50 more for Fenix 8. That in itself seems like a pretty easy answer, but I'd actually also say that there are reasons why you may actually prefer this 970 versus the Fenix 8. And we'll talk about all those things in this video, but the Fenix 8 is pretty compelling right now at those prices. When it comes to sizes, so the Forerunner 970 comes in one size with a 47mm case, but with the Fenix 8, these come in three different sizes, a 43mm model, a 47mm model, as well as a 51mm model. So this is where there's simply more size options with the Fenix 8 depending on your wrist size. And for the watches I'll be showing you in today's video, so this is going to be 970 in the soft cold titanium, and then this is the 47mm Fenix 8 AMOLED with the natural titanium, and then finally the 51mm Fenix 8 memory and pixel solar in the carbon gray. So for me, I have a 185mm circumference wrist, and the 47mm Fenix 8 as well as the 970 are my preference when it comes to the sizes. I can wear the 51mm Fenix 8 just fine, but where I notice the increased size the most is during sleep, where it's just less comfortable. And I apologize that I don't have the 43mm Fenix 8 for comparison, but it's similar in size to the 42mm Forerunner 570 that just came out. So I'll just go ahead and show you how all these look on a couple different wrist sizes right now, just so you can get an idea of how these look and size up. There's two other factors that can also play a role in comfort other than just the case diameter though. So how thick they are as well as how much they weigh. And this is where the 970 may be the better bet, where it's about a millimeter thinner than the equivalent size Fenix 8 and also weighs less. Now 20 or so grams may not sound like a lot on paper, but it actually can make a difference when it comes to wearability, where it is noticeable. So if you do want the lightest watch possible, that's going to be the 970. But of course there is also that 43mm option with the Fenix 8 to consider, especially if the 970 case size doesn't fit your wrist. One kind of interesting thing with the 970 when it comes to fitting smaller wrists though is that they actually include an extra little watch band loop holder thingy inside the box if you happen to have a lot of extra bands sticking out. So they actually sort of thought of that when it comes to smaller wrists. But I will say though that I do wish they offered a smaller size option with the 970 like they do with the Fenix 8. Now one thing that can improve wearability as well as reduce the weight for that matter on all these is if you switch out the stock silicone band for a nylon band. So all these come with silicone bands, but there is a slight difference here. So with the Fenix 8, so these come with Garmin's quick fit band. So basically this is just a little mechanism at the bottom that allows you to switch out these bands like super quickly, just like so. And with the 970, it doesn't come with quick fit bands, but it is actually quick fit band compatible. So all you have to do is remove the watch band pin, which requires a special tool, or you could possibly just do this with a small screwdriver. But once you remove the stock watch band, all you have to do is reinsert the pin into the case, and now it's quick fit band compatible. But it's not just their quick fit bands that are now compatible with the 970. You can also use one of their nylon bands like Garmin's Ultra Fit band. And I tend to prefer nylon bands where I find them to just be a little bit more comfortable than silicone, where it feels softer on the skin since it's fabric, and I also find that I can get a more customized fit. The only downside with these bands is that they'll stay wet a little bit after a shower, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, but other than that, I like nylon bands for the most part. And another benefit to nylon bands is that they're actually lighter than silicone. I know we're just talking about a few grams here, but I personally think that does make a difference when it comes to wearability. And then when it comes to materials and construction, so the 970 has a resin case along with a titanium bezel, and then the Fenix 8 has both a titanium option as well as a stainless steel option. The Fenix 8s use more metal all around though, where it still actually does have a resin main case, but it also has a metal backplate, and then the bezel is also more robust, where it's not only thicker, but it also extends over the lugs to protect them. So durability definitely goes to the Fenix 8, but that comes with extra weight. Something new that they've added with the 970 though is that it now has a sapphire lens, which was missing in the previous 965, and having the increased scratch resistance of sapphire just makes me feel a lot more warm and fuzzy, where I don't have to worry as much about getting scratches. The Fenix 8 titanium version also comes with a sapphire lens, but do note that the stainless steel Fenix 8 that uses Corning Gorilla Glass. And that actually brings us to another difference here, where the surface of the lens of the Fenix 8 is flat versus the 970, which is slightly curved at the edges. So you can still put a screen protector on either of these, but with the 970, since it has a curved edge, the screen protector won't go all the way to the edge. Another point to consider when it comes to durability is that the 970 has a 5 ATM water resistance rating, where the Fenix 8 has a 10 ATM rating. But the Fenix 8 also has what Garmin calls their leak-proof buttons, where the case is completely sealed off, where there's basically no chance of water ever getting into the case. Now, I don't think I've heard of any issues with the Forerunner 965, 955, and even previous Garmin Fenixes without these leak-proof buttons when it comes to water ingress, so I think for most of us, we don't need to be concerned. However, where those leak-proof buttons really do come into play and will make a difference is that the Fenix 8 is also rated for recreational scuba diving down to 40 meters, and this is one of the biggest differences between the Fenix 8 and the 970. The 970 does actually have a snorkeling profile though, so you should theoretically be able to go down to like 50 meters or so, but it does lack the scuba diving capabilities, and it also doesn't have a free diver apnea diving profile. And then beyond durability, there's of course looks, where I think these do both have a premium look, but the Fenix 8 does have more metal in the construction, which may elevate its premiumness. I think that's a word. But it's not to say that the 970 is a bad looking watch, by the way. I think this actually looks great. So I think both of these do look good, but it just may come down to like what you're looking for, where the Fenix 8 has arguably more rugged look to it, where the 970 has a more classic and cleaner look to it. The one thing I'd say though is that with all the options in the 970, there is going to be a splash of color, even on the black model, where it has like this neon yellow green color on the sensor guard, where there actually are truly all black options with the Fenix 8. So definitely something to consider if you want a completely black watch. Now, there's two different display types that are offered with the Fenix 8. An AMOLED model, which is the same display type as the 970, and then there's also a memory pixel solar option. So the AMOLED displays are pretty much just like your smartphone, where these are bright, vibrant displays with tons of colors and tons of contrast, but these displays require more power than a memory and pixel display. With memory and pixel displays, so these can excel when it comes to readability and direct sunlight, and then they also have some advantages when it comes to battery life, but these displays aren't as vibrant and don't have as much resolution as AMOLED. But if we're talking about the AMOLED displays first, so there's actually a lot of similarities between the 970 and the Fenix 8, where the 970 has the same 1.4-inch display size as both the 47mm AMOLED Fenix 8 as well as the 51mm AMOLED Fenix 8, and these are all Garmin's largest displays that they currently offer. And then with the smaller 43mm AMOLED Fenix 8, again, I apologize, I don't have that one on me, but that has a 1.3-inch display, which is similar to the Forerunner 265. So here's where you can just kind of see the difference in the display sizes. The 970 does have a slight advantage though when it comes to displays, where the 970 has an updated display panel which is brighter than the Fenix 8. Garmin doesn't usually publish actual brightness levels, but it's definitely noticeable that the 970 is brighter. The display on the Fenix 8 is still good though, and still can be totally readable outside, but it's just that the 970 is going to be brighter and easier to see. And then there's also the memory and pixel solar Fenix 8s, and these either have a 1.3-inch or 1.4-inch display depending on your size, but as you can see, these have much less resolution than the AMOLED versions. One of the advantages with these displays is that in direct sunlight, these can perform better than their AMOLED counterparts, but it's just more in those outdoor situations where these may excel. Indoors, especially in darker conditions, they may be harder to see without enabling the backlight. Garmin did actually used to have a memory and pixel solar option with their Forerunner 955 solar, but I definitely do not see them bringing that back in their Forerunner series. That chip is long gone. And one more thing to note is that they only offer the memory pixel Fenix 8 in the larger 47mm and 51mm sizes. There is no memory pixel option with the 43mm size. But there are also some other practical differences in regards to how they act in different situations like outdoors as well as indoors. And I have another video that goes through all those differences, which I'll have linked down in the description below. And this kind of brings us around to battery life. And this is where you'll get longer battery life from the Fenix 8, especially when it comes to recording outdoor activities. Now the battery life on the 970 is still good enough though to last nearly a full day, even in its highest accuracy setting, but the Fenix 8 just gets more. Now, if we're doing the most apples to apples comparison with the 47mm Fenix 8 to the 970, interestingly, daily battery life just using it as a smartwatch is actually pretty similar here if you're not using the always-on display. They haven't yet published numbers on the 970 while using the always-on display, but for my testing so far, I'm trending towards like 4 to 5 days, including using it to track outdoor activities, where with the Fenix 8, with similar conditions, I was getting more like 5 to 6. The drop in battery life with the 970 versus the previous 965 was definitely a bummer for all of us, I think, but they had to add more components inside like the microphone and speaker as well as the flashlight, which took up more room, which would normally be used for more battery capacity. But for those of you looking for the longest battery life possible, so that's going to be where the memory pixel solar Fenix 8 is going to be where it's at, where this can get weeks of battery life without having to recharge them. But the trade-off here is with the display where it's not as bright, not as vibrant, and not as crisp as the AMOLED counterparts. There's definitely still a place for memory pixel displays for all of us who want the longest battery life possible, but as we've seen from basically all smartwatch and sports watch manufacturers, trends have been leaning heavily towards AMOLED displays, where the technology is getting good enough now where someone can still get pretty decent battery life and very usable battery life while still benefiting from a display that's just like their smartphone. Now, one of the biggest upgrades of the 970, and arguably a big reason why it's now closer to the Fenix 8, is that it now has a built-in LED flashlight. And this is one of those features that's kind of hard to explain how useful it is until you actually have it. But of every single Garmin feature out there, this is literally the one feature I can't live without. I use this on a daily basis, whether that's getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, seeing something outside at night, and also just being more visible at night during an activity. It's hard to appreciate until you actually have it, but I'm hardcore team flashlight, and the good news is that all of these have flashlights. And then additionally, all of these also have microphones and speakers, so this is where you'll be able to take calls on the watch itself as long as your phone is in Bluetooth range. But do note that another thing similar is that none of these have cellular capabilities, so for all the connected features, you do need to have your phone with you. Now, I'm not typically a take a call on your watch kind of guy, but I've actually found the call functionality can come in handy during activities, like if my phone is in my backpack or in my running vest or something like that, where I can quickly take the call if I need to without having to fish out my phone. So while it is more of a smartwatch, smartphone related feature, I think it actually can be useful during activities as well. And then you can also use the microphone to access the voice assistant from your phone, like Google Assistant or Siri. And then you can also use the microphone for a voice command feature where you can do stuff like setting timers, setting alarms, as well as starting an activity. And then all of these also have onboard storage for music playback, where you can sync up music from streaming services like Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube Music. And then you can listen from a pair of Bluetooth headphones, but you can also listen using the built-in speakers. Now, when I first started hearing the tones and sounds from the 970, as well as the 570 for that matter, it sounded to me that the speaker was actually louder. And then listening to these side by side now, the 970 does seem actually louder than the Fenix 8.
Apple even like taunts how bright theirs are, probably because they're obviously at the top in terms of brightness levels, but once you start looking at it, we're like, wait a second, this is definitely brighter. Because I went out for a run with it right away, and it was just one of those like, whoa, this is brighter than
Now, when I asked Garmin about this, they couldn't really say if it was in fact a louder speaker. However, they did mention that the watch materials themselves could play a role in how loud it is. Like the increased metal on the construction of the Fenix 8 may deaden the sound more from the speaker versus the resin on the 970. And that kind of does make sense considering how the speaker enclosures play a big role in how a speaker sounds. And then when it comes to the actual user interface, so these all work pretty much the same for the most part, but the 970 has a slightly more modern look to it, where the Fenix 8 has a bit more subdued and maybe cleaner look to it. And then you also see that they even use rounder fonts in the 970 versus the Fenix 8, where it has more squared off fonts. So that's just going to be more of a personal preference kind of things, depending on which one you may like better. But that also translates to the watch faces, where again, the 970 has quite a different look to it versus the watch faces in the Fenix 8. And I'll just go ahead and run through all of these right now just so you can see what's offered on both of these. And when it comes to health sensors, again, pretty much identical here, where all these have Garmin's latest 5th generation heart rate sensor that can also track skin temperature changes during sleep, and then both also have ECG capabilities. The slight caveat here with the heart rate sensors actually has nothing to do with the heart rate sensor itself. It actually has to do with the weight of the watch, where the 970 may have a better chance of collecting more accurate heart rate because it's lighter. Heavier watches can actually bounce around the wrist a little bit more, which can lead to inaccuracies, and this can be seen with stuff like gravel biking as well as mountain biking. And in general, I found Garmin's 5th gen sensor to be a really good sensor, but I've also seen how it can be affected by weight as you go up in size with their Fenix line of watches. And if you're curious about some of those kinds of results, I have another video where I went super in depth with how the 5th gen sensor performs compared to an Apple Watch Ultra, which is a pretty interesting watch. Get it? And then for health feedback, so all of these will collect your heart rate and calories 24 hours a day. They both have sleep tracking. They both have blood oxygen saturation tracking. And then all of them also have their new breathing disturbances tracking, which was just recently added to the Fenix 8 via software update. And then the 970 also comes with their new evening report feature. So this is basically the night version of their morning report feature, where it'll kind of give you a summary of your day, like you either had a workout day or a rest day. And while this wasn't added with the update that was just recently released for the Fenix 8 for the breathing disturbances, this should be added to the Fenix Fenix 8 at some point via update. And then when it comes to training feedback, so again, basically the same here as well, where all these have training status, training readiness with HRV status, they all track your VO2 max for running, as well as cycling if you're using a cycling power meter, like basically all the things. One minor difference here though is that with the 970, they actually changed the performance widget slightly, where they separated out between running as well as cycling, where each have their own widget. With Fenix 8, it's all contained in one widget. And this is one thing that I'm not sure with the Fenix 8 will actually get this update in the future, but just a minor difference I wanted to point out. And the 970 also comes with some new running specific features like their new running economy metrics, as well as their step speed loss metric, which require their new HRM 600 heart rate straps. And then in addition, they also announced their new triathlon coaching plans, as well as their new multi-sport structured workouts. And the Fenix 8 will be getting all these features via software update at some point. When it comes to sport profiles, so these can track nearly every sport under the sun. However, the Fenix 8 does have some additional sport profiles here, like scuba diving as well as free diving. There's also some other water specific profiles that are only offered in the Fenix 8, like let's say water skiing and wakeboarding, and the very important tubing sport profile. Another thing that the Fenix 8 has along with those additional water sport profiles is their tides widget, which can provide tide information which isn't available on the 970. And another profile that's available on the Fenix 8 which isn't on the 970 is the jump master profile. So if you like hurling yourself out of perfectly good airplanes, the Fenix 8 is going to be where it's at. The 970, however, comes with a few new sport profiles in the multi-sport space, but being that the Fenix 8 is supposed to be their most capable watch yet, I'd anticipate, again, these should be added via software update sometime in the future. And then both of these also can track golf, and they also have thousands of golf courses that you can use on the watch itself, but the Fenix 8 does come with an expanded list of golf capabilities. Now, I haven't really golfed in decades, so I can't really speak to these features themselves, but here's a list of all the golf features that the Fenix 8 have which aren't available on the 970. But here's the entire list of sport profiles that are currently available on the Fenix 8 as well as the Forerunner 970, at least at the time of this filming, but this list may change over time. And then when it comes to data fields and data pages, again, this is pretty much similar here, where you can have more data pages than you probably need, so there's really no difference there. And then the same thing goes for data fields, where you can have up to 8 data fields on a page at a given time. And when it comes to accuracy for tracking outdoor activities, again, same across the board here, where all these have multi-band satellite chipsets where you can not only access different satellite systems, but also different satellite frequencies. So you'll be good to go with any of these when it comes to accuracy. All of these also have full offline topo maps, where these are fully routable maps with tons of information, including street names, trail names, bodies of water, landmarks like parks, and even stuff like grocery stores and even Starbucks locations. One difference with maps though is going to be with the AMOLED Fenix 8 as well as the 970 versus the memory pixel version of the Fenix 8, where this has less resolution, so maps won't have as much detail on those displays. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind if you're considering a memory pixel solar Fenix 8. And then when it comes to storage, so both the Fenix 8 as well as the 970 have 32 gigabytes of storage for both maps as well as music. And then when it comes to external sensors, so the list here is vast and very similar between these two, but the Fenix 8 compared to 2 additional sensors. So rangefinder sensors for hunting scenarios as well as trolling motor sensors for boating. So there's definitely a ton of similarities between these two watches, and both of these are extremely capable watches, but there's some key differences why you may want one over the other. The Fenix 8 is definitely a more capable watch out of these, and it's also more durable, but that does come at a higher price tag as well as the increased size and weight. There is something to be said about the 970 when it comes to being thinner and also lighter, where it's just more comfortable to wear. And having just switched over from a 47mm Fenix 8 to this, I do notice the weight as well as the size, especially during sleep, where I just don't notice the 970 as much as the Fenix 8. Now at full asking price, the price is pretty big between these two, but with the recent sale prices in the Fenix 8, that's pretty compelling with the Fenix 8 considering the additional features. Anyhow, what are your thoughts on these two? Are you kind of leaning one way or the other? Let us all know your thoughts down in the comments section down below on which one you're thinking as well as why, which actually may help others with their decision as well. And if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel for plenty more videos just like this that are coming soon. In the meantime, have fun out there and we will see you in the next video.